Caregiving can sometimes feel like an impossible struggle. Caregivers may be torn between taking care of loved ones and trying to maintain balance in life. The good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. The Caring Generation with host Pamela D Wilson is here to focus on the conversation of caring. You're not alone. In fact, you're in exactly the right place to share stories and learn tips and resources to help you and your loved ones. So now, please welcome the host of The Caring Generation, Pamela D Wilson.
This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, speaker, consultant, and guardian of the Caring Generation. The Caring Generation focuses on the conversation of caring, giving us permission to talk about aging, the challenges of caregiving, and everything in between. It's no surprise that needing care or becoming a caregiver changes everything. The Caring Generation is here to guide you along the journey, to let you know that you're not alone. You are in exactly the right place to share stories, learn about caregiving programs, and resources to help you and your loved ones plan for what's ahead. Invite your aging parents, spouses, family, friends, coworkers, and everyone you know to listen to the show. If you have a question or an idea for a future program or a video, share your idea with me by responding to my social media posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. This week, the topic is self-destructive caregiving behaviors. Family caregiving is stressful. Caregivers know the stress and the ongoing challenges of caring for another person. Non-caregivers who lack an understanding of what their caregiving friends experience will one day be shocked to learn how the caregiving role strips caregivers of life as they knew it. While many caregivers say they wouldn't change their decision to become a caregiver, those who participate in my online caregiver support groups are honest about the adverse effects on their careers, marriages, health, and trying to raise children. Self-destructive caregiving behaviors cross many areas of life, and you don't have to be a caregiver to participate in the habits I'm about to share. Self-destructive behavior patterns arise from trying to deal with ongoing stress, painful thoughts, emotions, or difficult relationships, and struggling to do this. Being a caregiver for elderly parents pulls adult children back into family relationships that may have been stressful or toxic earlier in life. One day, out of the blue, a phone call comes from aging parents who need help. Children who feel a responsibility and duty to help parents are thrown back into those relationships where parents may need ongoing support and help for many years. Aging parents can expect their children to be available to help out, even though the family never discussed caregiving expectations. We will discuss self-destructive caregiving behaviors on this program. Some might surprise you, many will not. Plus, we'll talk about ways to recognize the behaviors when they happen, so that you can replace the self-harming behaviors with positive habits that contribute to your well-being. Anyone interested in behavior change can learn these tactics. If you are a caregiver, you may notice that elderly parents also fall into the trap of self-destructive behaviors by refusing to take medications, eat healthy, and exercise. Who ever thought that there could be so many things that are good for us that we don't do, that are actually self-destructive? Knowledge is power. Learning about these is power. Beginning in childhood, the relationship children have with parents can lead to a fulfilling and happy life, or a mix of challenges and self-destructive behaviors. The self-destructive habits that aging parents carry with them today likely result from their relationship with their parents, your grandparents. If your parents were physically or verbally abusive or abused alcohol or drugs, then children are more likely to engage in some type of self-destructive behaviors. Think of this today if you are raising children and the behaviors that you model for them. We can only make positive choices when we work to understand the complexity of family relationships and our past. This has a significant effect on us today, but it doesn't mean that we have to be limited by those relationships. Looking back can lead to realizing the why of unhealthy habits so that positive behaviors can replace these past struggles. So let's start with a list of things that caregivers tell me they feel and experience. Self-destructive caregiving behaviors have an emotional component. Let's begin with an example, a desire for control over a caregiving situation that comes from wanting to be helpful, needing to be liked, or feeling that if situations can't be controlled, they won't turn out like you expect. Caregivers spend a lot of their lives doing for other people, not realizing, though, that this being helpful, this doing activity, prevents other people from doing things for themselves and being independent. Doing for others is a type of control that can harm the caregiver and the care receiver. Let me share an example of control and being too helpful. A husband was the caregiver for his wife, diagnosed with dementia, memory loss. Over time, she depended on him more and more for everything. As many caregivers do, the husband became seriously ill and was hospitalized. So their children placed Mom in memory care assisted living so that she would have care while their father's health improved. The first couple of weeks in memory care were rough for the entire family. But then, all of a sudden, Mom started to return to doing some of her old habits. The children were pleasantly surprised. Mom wanted to read the newspaper every day like she used to do. She began calling friends on the telephone when she hadn't used a phone in years. Mom started doing more things for herself, activities that her husband did for her because he wanted to be helpful or control their day-to-day routine or maybe some other reason. So as you see, doing for others can have unintended consequences, making care receivers more dependent on the caregiver, which really is the opposite of what caregivers want because many caregivers tell me they already feel overworked and exhausted. Could you all be causing these problems for yourself by being too helpful and too controlling? Caregivers who do too much exert control by taking away the abilities of elderly parents, spouses, grandparents, and other people to do things for themselves. Here's another example. A caregiving wife who strongly encouraged her husband to be active. Now, on the surface, encouragement might seem very positive, and it is. However, let's look at the husband's health concerns. He has type 1 diabetes that resulted in neuropathy in his feet. This feeling of numbness makes it painful to walk long distances. And because walking is unbearable, the husband's balance is not steady. As a result, he could fall and experience a severe fracture. So we're looking at a medical diagnosis, the effects of it, and the consequences, which many caregivers and care receivers don't do. So we have a husband who was previously very physically active, and he's become less active due to numbness and pain in his feet when he walks. The good news is that he's interested in swimming at the recreation center because he thinks this would be really good exercise. But the distance to walk from the car to the locker room to the swimming pool is too far for him to walk without experiencing excruciating pain and numbness in his feet. What's the solution? He's considering buying a scooter. A scooter for the elderly is kind of like those driving carts you see in the grocery store, or really like a mini golf cart. But his wife doesn't want him to get a scooter because she thinks he will stop walking. What's the downside of getting a scooter if the goal is to exercise, to be physically stronger and feel more independent? Here are a few questions to ask. What does the caregiving spouse fear? Will her husband go off to swim and spend less time with her? Might she be embarrassed if other people saw her husband driving a scooter? In many cases, we have to figure out what is happening inside the mind when participating in self-destructive behaviors that can harm us or another person. What's the motivating factor? Let's look at the bigger picture. For this man, weight-bearing activities like walking are painful and risky due to neuropathy in his feet that can cause a fall. On the other hand, swimming is excellent for the muscles and the heart. It's non-weight bearing. In addition to being physically beneficial, imagine the benefits of swimming to the mind of doing something that makes a person feel good. The husband might actually also make some new friends at the rec center or the swimming pool. Caregiving relationships that prevent one or both people from participating in activities that are good for them are not healthy. They can be self-destructive. It's true. Jealousy or resentment may exist in one or both people. For example, a sick parent may feel left behind if a caregiving daughter or son goes to work every day or spends time with friends. On the other hand, the caregiver may resent a demanding parent. So to deal with this, he or she may turn to drinking or smoking or other self-destructive caregiving behaviors to ignore how they feel about the situation. Many family caregivers are stuck in unpleasant and unbearable situations because they don't know how to flip the switch and look at the situation or respond differently. Let's talk specifically about unnecessary self-sacrifice, or what I like to call as martyrdom. Some caregivers give up excessive amounts of their lives and then are angry and resentful about doing this. They place careers or jobs on the back burner, delay getting married or having children. Some move into the home of an elderly parent to provide 24/7 care. Think about this. If you didn't like living with your parents when you were 18 or in your early 20s, what makes you think it will be any different at 30, 50, or 70? There can be a variety of motivators for self-destructive caregiving behaviors. For example, things a caregiver wants to avoid. If you're struggling with work and your life and paying your bills and a job, then moving into your parents' home to take care of them may seem like a way to avoid having to deal with all of that. But then you have all these other issues that you never thought about to deal with. It can be easier to focus and devote one's life to caring for another person instead of dealing with issues or conflicts in our own lives. And the problem is then we never learn to work through those. They stay with us for the rest of our lives. There are other situations where adult children become trapped caring for elderly parents who are filled with blame and criticize the caregiver's choices. Parents who don't want the caregivers to have friends or get a job because then parents wouldn't have the caregiver's full attention. What about parents who are moody or those who create drama? Do your siblings refuse to help you care for aging parents? Think about this. There's probably a backstory there you might want to ask about instead of judging your brothers or sisters. Other self-destructive caregiving behaviors include a lack of self-care or self-neglect. Self-neglect means caregivers or aging parents who do little or nothing for themselves, and as a result, their physical and emotional health gets worse. Caregivers will gladly take elderly parents to the doctor for checkups, but won't make time to see the doctor themselves. Caregivers want parents to eat nutritionally or exercise, yet they don't do either of these. Self-destructive behaviors arise when caregivers place the well-being of others above their health and well-being. How many of you are doing this? If you feel emotional about your caregiving situation, feelings of resentment, anger, guilt, you may be doing too much. Not spending you time to create a mindset that allows you to reset your thoughts and think about how to change a situation you don't like won't get you to where you want to go. You have to spend this time. Feeling isolated or depressed are more self-destructive caregiving behaviors. This state of mental distress is why managing your thoughts, what you think, becomes essential. Thoughts result in our reality day to day. When thinking can change your feelings, then behavior change can follow. But it can be challenging to do this if you're not clear on why you feel depressed or frustrated or anxious or a whole list of other unattractive feelings. Do you also, though, understand what makes you happy? What makes you excited? What makes you look forward to something? It's important to understand both sides, the negatives and the positives. Understanding other self-destructive caregiving behaviors like eating junk food, smoking, drinking, taking drugs, gambling, cutting, or any other self-harming activities is necessary to figure out how to change these habits. So where do we begin? Start a journal or a notebook. Begin noticing your feelings, happy or sad. At the moment that you have the feeling, write down what is happening to make you feel this way, what makes you feel bad, and what makes you feel really, really good. Because that thing that makes you feel really, really good is more of what you want to put into your life. Keeping a thought diary can help you understand your feelings because the reasons may not be so obvious. It may take some thinking time to relate today's experience to an experience you had a year ago or 10 years ago. That's okay. Making an effort to figure all of this out is progress toward change that can feel uncomfortable when life feels like it's totally out of control, but managing through this will help you regain control of your life, your emotions, the way that you feel day to day. So let's just run through another laundry list of self-destructive caregiving behaviors before we move to steps that you can take to work through this state of discomfort. Here's the list. Believing you'll fail, failing to take action, procrastinating, self-pity, being mean to other people, complaining, dwelling on the negative, criticizing others. Identifying these behaviors can require alone time to be honest with yourself about how you got to where you are today so that you can be somewhere else tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Being honest with ourselves and other people is an opportunity to build life skills, improve caregiving relationships, rise above daily challenges. It is helpful, especially in caregiving relationships, if the persons involved can be honest about their feelings. Being honest takes a willingness to avoid blame and take full accountability for being in today's situations. Acknowledging the common goals of caregiving are vital, while recognizing that the caregiver and the care receiver may be at different stages in life. Parents are retired, while children are building careers, getting married, or having children. Each have different priorities. By following through to discuss these difficult subjects, it is possible to identify options and progress beyond self-destructive caregiving behaviors for the caregiver and for the aging parent who needs care. More on this after a short break. Pay it forward to help others dealing with health, aging, or caregiving issues by sharing information about this show and my website, PamelaDWilson.com. The Caring Generation is available worldwide on my website and your favorite podcast and music apps, Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, and more. You can find links to all of these on my website, PamelaDWilson.com. As a caregiver, you don't have to go it alone. Caregiving doesn't have to be a do-it-yourself job. Visit my website to schedule a one-to-one telephone or video consultation with me. Click on How I Help, then Family Caregivers and Eldercare Consultation. You can also check out my online caregiver program, resources, and support page. This is Pamela D. Wilson on The Caring Generation. Stay with me. I'll be right back. This is Pamela D. Wilson, caregiving expert, author, and speaker on The Caring Generation, where there are now over 130 episodes responding to questions from family caregivers. Visit and share my website, PamelaDWilson.com, where you'll find my caregiving library, Caring for Aging Parents blog, online caregiver courses, and more. Let's return to ways to work through self-destructive caregiving behaviors. Instead of self-isolating to avoid thinking about uncomfortable or difficult family situations, make time for self-reflection. Make time for yourself. Get up early and find a quiet space where you can think or journal. Find quiet time before you go to bed to write down your feelings about the day. Sometimes doing routine activities like house cleaning, laundry, or yard work can be a great time for self-reflection. Figure out an activity that works for you to give you thinking time. Make a list of self-destructive caregiving behaviors you notice in yourself, and prioritize the most uncomfortable ones that you would like to tackle. Let's use an example of being constantly criticized by an aging parent or spouse who does not have memory loss or a mental health diagnosis. I say no memory loss or mental health because these would be a separate discussion with very different recommendations. People with memory loss can't remember conversations or change their behaviors. Persons diagnosed with mental illness may also have little control over their actions or responses. So let's talk about criticism by a care receiver toward a caregiver who really is trying to do his or her best. If you are the caregiver, how do you respond? Do you get angry? Do you criticize back? Or do you walk away and isolate yourself to get away from the parent or the spouse who's criticizing? Do you turn to alcohol or drugs to numb your feelings of anger or resentment? Do you feel like you're not a good person? Maybe you feel like your mom or dad will never be happy with you. You might feel like a failure because you can't seem to get anything right, or maybe it's something else. What would you like to do instead of these responses to criticism? Let's say that you would like to be able to state your feelings and ask the other person to explain why they feel the need to be critical. This would be a great starting point for a two-way conversation that might lead to a better understanding and a better relationship. While elderly parents can be critical because they feel out of control over a situation or because they have to be dependent on others for care, doesn't mean that it's okay to be mean or disrespectful or critical to their caregivers. Being in constant pain can make a person irritable or short-tempered. There could be many reasons for a parent's behavior, and until you understand, it's difficult to react appropriately. But avoiding discussions about hurtful interchanges is one of the many self-destructive caregiving behaviors that can harm the caregiver. When caregivers remain silent and hold in their feelings, they actually reinforce that it's okay for an aging parent or spouse to be critical. Think of when you were a child. Did your parents let you misbehave or did they intervene? Like it or not, the roles reverse when you become the caregiver for an aging parent or spouse. Look at what isn't working in your caregiving relationship and identify ways to respond so that you're not damaging your health by eating a bag of Oreos or drinking a bottle of wine whenever you become upset. Instead, find ways to be compassionate with yourself and participate in self-care. So, rather than eating the bag of Oreos, get out of the house and go for a walk or a drive. Rather than reaching for that bottle of wine, call a friend. If you have a drinking problem, go to an AA meeting. Why allow the behaviors of another person to drive you to harmful behaviors? Don't give up your power or your self-worth to anyone. So in the case of having a conversation with a critical care receiver, think about what you want to say. Role play the conversation with yourself, another family member, or your best friend. The goal is to be firm, honest, and compassionate. You don't want to criticize or blame or engage in any negative behaviors. You only want to state how you feel when verbally attacked, and then ask why the other person feels it's necessary to criticize. Listen to their feedback and think about whether any of it is valid or reasonable. Sometimes we do things routinely that drive somebody else crazy and they react in frustration, and then we react in frustration. Think of silly, simple things that are irritable, like finding the toilet seat up or dishes left in the sink instead of being put in the dishwasher. These are simple things, but they're the things that when piled one on top of another and another and another can become really annoying. When working through challenging caregiving relationships that make you feel unappreciated, frustrated, angry, or any other negative feelings, it's essential to identify your emotions and feelings and the emotions and feelings of the person you care for. Then talk about why you both feel the way you feel. This action is called emotional validation, so that you can learn about, understand, and express acceptance of another person's emotional state or their feelings. Validation doesn't mean that you agree with the feelings, but that you understand how another person might feel a certain way that is different from you. So let's say that, crazy example, right? Snakes or spiders scare the heck out of you, while another person loves snakes or spiders. That's a simple example of two people understanding how another person feels, but not having that feeling. If you've ever had someone disagree with your feelings or your thoughts or your beliefs, you may have felt defensive. An example would be a family caregiver who is not a caregiver telling you that you shouldn't feel this way, or caregiving for your parent can't be that hard, or it's something that you should do. Now, if you're that caregiver working until exhaustion and you hear these statements, you probably feel defensive, angry, and frustrated. These feelings then can take you to self-destructive caregiving behaviors, not habits that are healthy or good for you. When these types of destructive relationship exchanges happen, you probably don't want to talk to the other person or spend time with them, right? You want to get away from them. That's because they don't understand you or what you're experiencing. You're also probably not going to trust them very much. You probably won't want to talk to them in the future or share your feelings in the future because you feel they're going to criticize you. So how do we work through the steps of emotional validation so that we feel better about relationships? The first is what's called active listening, which means that you listen and work to understand another person without criticizing, without telling them what to do. So just listen, ask questions, don't offer solutions. Because the minute you start to tell somebody else what to do, you end the process of emotional validation because you are ignoring how they feel. Next, regardless of whether you agree with how they feel, you must accept that they have the right to feel that way. This is hard because we can't change the way another person feels. No matter how much we would like to wave a magic wand and make everything better, we can't do that. And really, that's not our job. They have to resolve their feelings and how they feel and how they react. So this discussion that we're having, it's not a right or wrong discussion. It's not that the caregiver's right or the care receiver's wrong or vice versa. The discussion goal is to build a pattern to have honest and safe conversations where you can talk about anything and not feel criticized or attacked. Another important step throughout this process is to restate back to the person you're listening to how you think they feel so that you're not making any incorrect assumptions. Because we all have what's called bias. We're biased and we think the way that we do, and we do the things that we do because of our personal experiences. But everybody has personal experiences that we don't recognize, so quickly we judge somebody else. We have to learn not to do that. So let's say that you've listened to the care receiver, you've gone through all these processes, then you have to gain your aging parents' or your spouse's agreement to work through this process with you so that they understand you, the caregiver. Now, this is challenging because in most caregiving situations, we don't talk about feelings, right? We feel them, we get angry, we get resentful, but we're not talking about our feelings, and we're not talking about how to fix this or resolve this situation. I know many caregivers who don't want to burden an aging parent or a spouse with their emotions or worries, so they remain silent and they go off and do all these self-destructive caregiving behaviors. On the other hand, the aging parent or the spouse may feel the same way, but instead they don't have a way to resolve this, so they get angry and frustrated and critical. The problem is neither side is initiating this conversation because they're not sure their concerns will be heard, or they don't trust the other person enough to be honest. So this takes us back to the beginning of self-destructive caregiving behaviors. If you feel emotionally distraught and unable to resolve conflict, do you trust the person that you have the conflict with? If not, that's a problem. This could be aging parents, siblings, or another person. A lack of trust can mean that a relationship is on shaky ground. And as you probably experience, or you probably know, it creates complications in your relationships and in a lot of areas of your life. The path forward is to identify why you feel the way you feel, or why you respond the way you do. Spend time thinking about this so you can choose to react differently, which will then change the outcome of your future interactions. Although to do this, you probably have to go through the emotional validation process with that person whom you're having conflict with or emotional distress with. And have both of you agree that you want a better relationship, and you agree to work through it because you love each other or the relationship is important and you don't want to walk away from the relationship. I know that taking these actions can seem like climbing a mountain, and it's not easy because you have to be brutally honest and feel safe to bare your soul, just as the other person does. If these conversations don't work out as you hope, which they may not always, this can take time, right? Just because you decide to have a conversation tomorrow doesn't mean this situation is going to magically resolve. It could take you weeks or months to work through this. But let's say they don't work out and you end up in the same situation and you're feeling challenges, but you decide that, at least you tried and you're going to walk away and go do something else. You have that power to remain in the relationship or not. But the benefit of making the attempt is that you can practice emotional validation and then use it in other relationships in your life to make them more positive. Things that we learn when managing caregiving relationships really are amazing, and they apply to so many other parts of our life. So only you can decide if it's time to identify and stop self-destructive caregiving behaviors and take back your personal power. Only you can make that choice. If you're in a relationship that you're having problems with and you can't have that conversation, share this podcast with the other person and say, hey, I've got something that I want to talk to you about, and I don't know how to talk to you about it. So would you do me the favor of listening to this podcast so that maybe then we can start to have a conversation that can improve our relationship? Because I don't know how to begin the conversation. Please share The Caring Generation and my website with everyone you know who is interested in proven, reliable tips, information, resources, and research about caregiving, aging, health, family relationships, and everything in between. This is Pamela D Wilson, caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. I look forward to being with you again soon. God bless you all. I'm sending love and light to everyone out there. Sleep well tonight. Have a fabulous day tomorrow and a great week until we are here together again.
Tune in each week for The Caring Generation with host Pamela D Wilson. Come join the conversation and see how Pamela can provide solutions and peace of mind for everyone. Here on Pamela D Wilson's The Caring Generation.